Hey, say some moments sneak up on you, soft as a breeze, but change everything forever. That afternoon didn't come with thunder or fireworks. Just the hum of an old ceiling fan, the scent of paper and coffee, and a quiet voice that finally let itself be heard. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was late April, one of those rare afternoons when the sun isn't too pushy and the wind carries just enough warmth to make you feel like life might be giving you a second chance. I was in my classroom alone, grading a stack of essays that had been sitting on my desk far too long. 45 minutes past the last bell. Most of the school had emptied out except for the odd sound of a locker closing in the distance or a janitor's cart wheeling down the hallway. My classroom had always been a bit of a refuge. Lamps instead of fluorescent lights, a worn-out rug near the window, and plants along the sill that my students either ignored or quietly watered when I wasn't looking. I taught literature mostly to seniors who were half checked out already, heads full of college plans or jobs or just getting out. But this year was different. There was one student, let's call him Sam, tall, quiet, always polite, the kind of kid who kept to himself but never skipped a reading. He wasn't a straight-A student, but when he did speak in class, his words had weight. And unlike many others, he never pretended to be someone he wasn't. That day I was halfway through his essay on The Catcher in the Rye, which was rambling and awkward but honest, when there was a knock at my door. I looked up to see him standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes a little more tired than usual. "Miss Allen, do you have a minute?" he asked. I motioned him in, not even thinking. "Of course, Sam. What's on your mind?" He didn't sit right away, just stood there shifting his weight like the words were heavy in his chest, and he was still deciding if it was worth letting them out. I just didn't know who else to talk to. It was one of those moments where time tilted slightly. I set my pen down and gave him my full attention. "You're safe here," I said gently. "Take your time." He sat finally at the desk closest to mine. The late sunlight caught the dust in the air, turning the room golden and soft. Outside the world went on. Cars drove by. A basketball thumped on concrete. But inside there was a stillness, like the room was listening too. He began slowly telling me about how things had been hard at home since his mom lost her job. How he felt like he was always carrying things he couldn't talk about with anyone. How school felt like a blur most days and how he felt invisible, like he was just going through the motions. "I read that book 3 times, he said suddenly. "Holden just got it. The way everything feels fake. The way you don't know who you're supposed to be." I nodded, letting silence stretch so he knew I wasn't going to rush him. "I don't really talk much," he added. "But you always listen, even when no one else does." There it was, that quiet truth that slips through when someone finally feels seen. My chest tightened, not out of sadness, exactly, but out of something softer, something that felt like grace. "You're not invisible, Sam," I said. "You're paying attention. That matters more than you know." He looked down, then up again. "Do you ever feel like you're just surviving?" I gave a soft laugh, not at him, but in recognition of all the time, but sometimes talking like this. "It feels like more than surviving. It feels like we're actually living." The room was silent again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken things, respect, vulnerability, and maybe even a kind of quiet courage. After a while, he stood to leave, shouldering his bag again. "Thanks, Miss Ellen. I didn't know I needed to say all that." "You're welcome anytime," I said. "You don't have to carry it all alone." As he walked out, I watched the door close behind him, the hallway beyond lit with fading gold. I sat back in my chair, not quite ready to return to the essays. Something had shifted, not just for him, but for me, too. It's strange how one conversation, one honest moment, can reach places in you that you didn't know needed touching. I didn't know it then, but that afternoon would stay with me like a soft echo, like a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply speak. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because anything terrible had happened. Quite the opposite. Something in that quiet exchange with Sam had stirred a part of me. I thought I'd long be buried under years of lesson plans and faculty meetings. I remember lying in bed, listening to the hum of the fan overhead, and the occasional creak overhead and of the old house settling into its bones. I thought about his face when he finally let the words come. There was something sacred about being trusted like that. It humbled me. The next morning, School resumed its usual rhythm. Bells, chatter, the clatter of lockers and sneakers on tile. But I moved through it differently. I noticed things more. A girl in the back row tracing something absent-mindedly into her notebook. A boy who stayed behind after class, pretending to tie his shoe, clearly wanting a reason to linger. These moments were always there. I had just forgotten to pay attention. When I saw Sam again, it was 2 days later. He didn't say much, just nodded as he walked past my desk, but his eyes met mine for a second longer than usual, and in that glance there was recognition. Not gratitude exactly, more like an understanding that something had been quietly agreed upon between us. That Friday, I gave them an assignment. Write a letter to a character from any book we'd read that semester. Address it as if the character were real. Tell them what you would say if you had the chance. Most students sighed or groaned, but Sam just stared at his paper, thoughtful. After class, he lingered. Is it okay if I write to someone not from a book? He asked. Someone real? I paused. If it means something to you. Yes, absolutely. He nodded, didn't explain, and just left the room with his notebook pressed tight to his chest. That weekend I found myself driving without much direction. The kind of drive you take when your mind is full and your house feels too quiet. I ended up at the park just outside town, the one with the old oak trees and the duck pond that had seen better days. I used to bring my husband here before the silence between us got too loud. I sat on a bench sipping coffee from a thermos, watching leaves scatter across the water. And I thought about how rare it is these days for someone to really say what's on their heart. We live in a world of small talk and surface-level everything. But when someone opens up, when they drop the act and just speak plainly, it's powerful. Monday rolled around, and Sam handed in his letter folded neatly. No name on the outside. I waited until after school to read it when the classroom was quiet again, the light slanting low through the windows like it always did. His handwriting was small and careful, the kind of writing that tries not to take up too much space. Dear Mom, it began. My breath caught. I know you're doing your best. I know you're tired. I see how you don't eat some nights so I can. I hear you crying in the laundry room when you think I'm asleep. I don't say much because I don't want to make it harder. But I wish you knew how much I notice, how much I care. You think you have to carry all of it, but you don't. I'm strong, too. You raised me that way. There was more. Pages of it. Honest, vulnerable, and raw in a way I hadn't expected. I sat there long after I'd finished reading, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. It wasn't meant for me, but in a way it was, because he'd chosen to share it, and that meant something, trust me. I wrote a simple note on the back. She would be proud to read this, and I'm honored you shared it. The next day, he didn't say anything. Just took the letter back quietly and tucked it away. But I noticed how he stood a little straighter, like speaking the words had lightened him just a bit. That week, something began to shift in me, too. I started to think about the ways I'd learned to keep myself quiet. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Years of being the strong one, the listener, the stable adult in the room. It wears on you. Sam's honesty stayed with me like a ripple. It made me want to look at my own life differently, to ask myself what truths I'd buried just to keep moving forward. I didn't know where it would lead yet, but I knew this. Some stories begin quietly in a classroom, in a letter, in the gentle unfolding of someone finally saying, "This is who I am." And when you hear it, really hear it, it changes you. The days after Sam's letter felt different in the classroom. There was an unspoken tension, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that hums quietly just beneath the surface, like the moment before a song starts. You know something's about to change, but you don't know exactly how. One afternoon the air held that particular stillness, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the bookshelves. I was organizing papers when the door creaked open and Sam slipped inside. "Miss Allen," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. I looked up and smiled. "Hey, Sam, come on in. What's up?" He closed the door behind him and took a seat, folding his hands in his lap. For a moment, I thought he might just leave again, but then he took a breath and began. "I've been thinking about what I wrote in that letter," he said. "About my mom and everything. I didn't tell her. Not yet. But writing it helped me see things clearer. Made me realize I need to do more than just survive." I nodded, encouraging him without interrupting. It was clear this was a big step. "I want to figure out what that means for me," he continued. "I don't want to just get by anymore, but I don't even know where to start." His honesty was disarming, and I felt a swell of admiration for the courage it took to admit that out loud. We sat in silence for a moment, the late afternoon light softening the edges of the room. "You're asking the right questions," I said gently. "Sometimes the first step is just recognizing you want more. It's okay to be uncertain. Life doesn't come with a map." He looked at me, a small smile breaking through. "Yeah, I guess it doesn't." That conversation stretched into a routine. Sam would come by after school, sometimes with questions about books, sometimes just to talk. We talked about everything from dreams to disappointments, the pressure to be okay when you really feel anything but, and the quiet moments that sometimes mean the most. One day, as spring edged closer to summer, he surprised me with a small drawing. It was a sketch of the old oak tree from the park where I'd sat that weekend, the branches sprawling like open arms. On the side, a single sentence, "There is strength in asking for help." I kept that drawing taped to my desk for months. It was a reminder that growth often comes in small, quiet steps. At times, what feels like vulnerability is actually bravery. Meanwhile, I started opening up more myself. Not about all the details, those I still kept close, but about the struggles and doubts that come with being human at any age. I shared stories from my past, moments I'd been afraid to admit even to myself. And in doing so, I found my students, especially Sam, listening more deeply. Our connection wasn't just teacher and student anymore. It was something quieter but no less important, a shared space of honesty, respect, and understanding. One late afternoon, as we packed up after class, Sam paused by my desk. "Miss Allen, thanks for listening." "For real." I smiled, touched in a way that words couldn't quite reach. "Thank you for trusting me." He hesitated, then added, "I'm trying to believe that things can be different, that I don't have to carry everything alone." "I'm glad you're trying," I said. "And you don't have to." As he left, I watched the door close behind him, feeling that same quiet shift I'd felt weeks ago. Life has a way of surprising you in the unlikeliest places with the softest voices. That afternoon, I realized that sometimes the deepest connections come from moments we don't plan, from the willingness to be seen and to see others in return. And that kind of honesty, it's the beginning of something real. That summer, after the school year had wrapped up and the halls had fallen silent, I found myself reflecting more and more on those afternoons with Sam. The memories settled around me like the soft warmth of a late afternoon sun, gentle, persistent, and impossible to ignore. Sometimes I'd think about how easy it is to get caught up in the routine of teaching, the lessons, the grading, and the meetings. How those things can start to feel like the whole world, even though the true heart of it, the human connection, often lives in quiet moments like the ones I shared with Sam. One evening, I received an unexpected message from him. It was simple, almost shy in tone. "Miss Allen, I got a job at the community center. It's part-time, but it feels good, like I'm doing something. Thanks for believing in me." I stared at the screen for a long time, a warmth spreading through me. The boy who had once sat quietly in the back of my classroom, carrying so much weight no one saw, was starting to find his footing, and I had been there to witness the first steps. The next school year came around, and though Sam had moved on, I'd often found myself thinking about the courage it took to be honest, not just with me, but with himself. That kind of bravery is rare and precious, especially in a world that often tells us to hide our struggles and put on a brave face. I began to encourage other students to find their voices, to share their truths, no matter how small or difficult, because I'd learned something vital from Sam. That honesty can open doors we didn't even know were closed, and it can heal wounds we thought were permanent. Looking back now, I realized that afternoon when Sam first spoke honestly with me was more than just a moment in a classroom. It was a quiet turning point for both of us. A reminder that connection and understanding can change the course of a life, no matter the age or circumstance. So, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this. Don't underestimate the power of simply listening and of being heard. Sometimes that's all it takes to start healing, to start living. Thank you for joining me in this memory. Wherever you are watching from, I hope it reminds you to reach out, to speak up, and to hold space for the honesty that's waiting inside all of us. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each